Our first candidate is Tom Mccullen, better known as Tom Mac. Come on up, Tom.
Okay. My name is Tom Mccullen. I'm a third generation Sag Harbor native. My grandfather was the first basketball coach in Pearson High School in 1908. My dad founded the minor leagues, which was basically the intramural program for the Little League for the kids that didn't make the team. And myself, I've been a youth basketball coach for the last 23 years. I have two generations of kids that went through Pearson and still are. I have a son who's a sophomore. You'll be reading about him in the paper tomorrow for his accomplishments. I was a single dad for many years. I met Cindy. We've been married 21 years last week. We had two more. So I've put two generations of kids through this school so far, and I've been involved from kindergarten to 12th grade for the last 32 years. That is a lot of morning sings. So my business experience is I've been in landscaping for 36 years, and it's really morphed into a great small business company. And one of the things that we do, it's not just landscaping, is we evolved with property management. And one of our most important clients is a medical center. And we see all the physical aspects of the indoors and outdoors. So medical centers are very challenging. We're on call 24/7. We cannot have any breakdowns because of blood and medicine. So we're on call for anything. We also forecast the structures of the building. We do an analysis of the roofs, making sure the place is running top-notch all the time on a very strict budget, too. So that's my qualifications. The second question, I'm going to do these questions, right?
Sure, please.
Okay.
On the back of the agenda, there are a list of questions that were sent to the candidates.
So it says the sports programs benefit many shared services. What could you do to get shared services in specialty learning areas such as music, arts, trades, IB? I talked to a member of the board on the BOCES, and it's on record from last week's video of Meet the Candidates. We send not many kids all the way up to Selden, Riverhead, and he said it is a possibility we could have a shared BOCES program out here in Sag Harbor, the way we used to in East Hampton many years ago. We would not only save money on transportation costs, but we might be able to add money to our school system. The arts program on the East End, everybody knows this is an artist community. The art program was actually from a board member many, many years ago who came in with a mission and a following with the community to advance our art system. It's become one of the most respected and highest ranking art programs on the East End. My daughter is a beneficiary of that. She just completed her second year of MICA. She's on the dean's list. We're really proud of her accomplishments up to this point. She got a lot of scholarship money and a lot of local scholarship money. So bringing that into Sag Harbor and offering it as special services for other schools is an option. The IB, I talked to the IB program. There were some questions about it, but the IB program is exceptional because I've talked to some parents who have their kids in universities now. And the kids in the IB program are very much more advanced than the kids in their classes at the universities. So there's something to be said for that in a very positive way. And we might be able to help some other schools along with that. Music reminds me of special ed and the arts program. It seems to be struggling. I think there was a concern from a couple people that once the kids get to a certain age, they flop out a little bit. Like East Hampton was just recognized for a exceptional program that they have built. We have exceptional music teachers. We have a lot of money invested in musical equipment. So I don't know the answers, but the way we built this special ed program from zero and the way we built the art program from zero, I would ask for more community participation if that's where we want to advance. Art trades. I also mentioned on the, there's a wide spectrum of kids that we have. We have special ed, and my son, he's 35 years old, he graduated. And back then, he had dyslexia. So they've come leaps and bounds because people really banded together, and they've made our special ed so much better, and there's still so much more to learn. All the way to the IB program, which challenges great students. And in the middle of that, you have students that are going to go to college and students that are not going to go to college. And I think the trades are very important for the kids that are not going to go. So that's where the BOE thing came up. It's been really nice to see. I know 4 men, 4 men that are 34, 35 years old are building our own houses in our communities because of the trades that they have today. So, the district has accumulated substantial reserves with funds left over at the end of previous school years. What is a healthy reserve, and when is it necessary to refund the taxpayers and the community? This is a tough one. I would invest the reserves first by weaning off the money that we pay the Montauk Bus Company for all the added services and extra busing that they do. There have been numbers out there that we spend almost $400,000 just busing our kids to sporting events and other things. Numbers have told me otherwise. By looking at the budget, I think that number's much higher. So if we can wean off the Montauk Bus Company and purchase our own buses, which we do have money for, at least 1 bus a year, which we need anyway, that could be accomplished in saving taxpayers' money. I did a little research. Approximately 4% of what we have in the reserve is mandated by the state that we keep in reserve for a rainy day. We can't keep any more than that. It's about 4%, if I'm not mistaken. So, would I love to give the taxpayers money back? Absolutely. But more importantly, I would like to stop the bleeding. I ran for the board in 2004, and we were $23 million. We've gone up $1.1 million per year up to this point. Why? Yes, things change. We have to forecast insurances and salaries and administrative costs and programs for kids, but we don't automatically have to go up $1 million a year. So I don't think getting a refund is a reality for now, but we can look into it and work on it. I don't have all the answers for that, but I do know that we don't have to spend $1 million a year on our budget. Number 4, is the cost of the IB program worth the expense versus, I don't have my reading glasses, these are my regular glasses, so. Is the cost of the IB program worth the expense of its benefits to all students in our schools as opposed to only the students in the program? I think I already answered that question, yes, especially with the spectrum of kids from special ed all the way to IB and how we are doing so much better compared to other students in other universities. We are far ahead with our IB graduates. So with that, how am I doing?
You're doing good. You have 4 minutes left.
I'm going to make that Stella Maris the last one. That's a lemon that we need to make lemonade out of somehow. What would you cut from the budget now, or if it were defeated? I am on record last week as passing the budget with an asterisk. I am committed to any cuts that we can make without compromising our students. Also, there's a separate proposition that nobody has talked about yet, to have an SUV and a bus, and I don't know why they're together, but the SUV is a vehicle that can only hold 4 students, and they're counting on this SUV to get the Sagaponack and the Wainscott children to come to our school, because we do make over $1 million a year for our elementary school. So with that being said, that proposition's on the budget, and there's no agreement yet. That's on the proposition of the voters in Sagaponack and Wainscott on election night, so it doesn't make any sense to me. So even if we lose, what are we going to do with an SUV that only takes 4 kids? You can't take them to a golf outing, track, or anything. If somebody told me the truth of why they really want this thing, maybe I could get behind it. But that's a definite no for me. It should be a no for the community too. But specifically, where do you feel the budget process needs to be managed better? As you recall, I think the only meeting I missed was the last one, and many people left this building shaking their heads after the superintendent presented the budget, which was not complete. Even up to last night, they were presenting the budget, and they still weren't sure what they had. So that budget, it always comes up at the last minute, and I just don't know why. This process should start earlier, even with the community involved. There's so many people out here, local and people that have moved here, that come from various economic backgrounds and expertise. We need to get the community involved to be the watchdogs of what we're doing with this. There's geniuses that live out here, and I'm not one of them, but I'm a listener, and I'm here to represent my community. There are many retirees, and that would be if we do that, it'd be such a brighter solution for transparency. You know, we need to be more transparent with what we do here. So when we talk about Stella Maris, and, you know, right from the top, when we purchased that building, all I know is in my field, I do a lot of revegetation. I'm a specialist in that area. I'm relied on both townships. They even call me for advice on things. When you're getting ready to purchase a piece of property, you have an engineer and inspection done. For some reason, we bought that building, and then we found out there was many, many problems with it.
1 minute left, Tom.
1 minute left. Oh my gosh. All I know, the community really needs to get involved in that. Last night, they even want to put more money into it, and they're going to ask for your vote for more. So that's going to be a big, big issue. My fellow candidates, they're really good people who do care. The people coming in tonight do care about our community. What separates me from those, though, is most of them have kids in the elementary school. I've been through the spectrum twice already, and now I have grandchildren in the elementary school coming up through. I've been through administrators and teachers. I've had 12 people in one room with one of my children, and that's how dedicated our teachers are. I don't like the politicalness of what's happening right now. I ran in 2004, and it was the most honorable, unpolitical campaign ever. What's happening now is things are being divided. The secret meetings, even a member of TASH went to a meeting that we weren't invited to. And so, like, who has an agenda here? The only agenda is our students and our community. And just one more thing. We have to find a way. I'd like to talk to people like Fred Thiel. Our teachers are having a really hard time, especially the new ones, staying out here. Can we research something to get them a tax rebate? You know, like we do for us. And the last thing I want to say is, I don't want to see anybody, whoever retired, move away from this beautiful place because they had to, because of economics. I don't want to see any young kids move away from here if they don't have to, because of economics. It truly takes a village. Wish I had more time, and I really hope you consider me. I am number 5 on the ballot. There was 5 of us kids growing up. I had 5 kids, and I am number 5 on the ballot. And with that, I'm going to say good night.
Thanks for coming. Is our candidate Yorgos Zabridis?
Yes.
Thank you for oh, I have a microphone?
Yes, and a camera, so smile.
Oh, good, nice. All right. So thank you for inviting me. My name again is Yorgos Zabridis. I've been living here in Noyac for the last 3 years in the Northampton colony with my wife Alicia that is here, my son Nathan, who is a 3rd grader in the school. And then I have another one, another son, Julian, that he's going to start this fall in the school. I have a big interest in the school. I've been involved for the last 3 years in the policy committee. I got the chance to work with a lot of community members, board members, school teachers, administrators, and it gave me a really good grasp of what's happening at the school from a policy point of view. I have a strong finance experience also that I think it's important for the school. And I hope you guys consider me for the board. So we jump into the questions? Absolutely. Okay. So I think the first question was, yeah, what would I bring to the board? So there's a couple of things I would bring to the board. I mean, the number one thing is I've been working for 20 years in corporate finance for big companies, Fortune 500 companies. I did a lot of budgets, investment analysis, cost-benefit analysis. These are like very important things, and it's a big part of what the board does. The board needs to supervise the budget. They need to understand, like, if the approach that the school administrators are following are the right when you develop the budget. You have to figure out what's the future financial position of the school. For example, we're supposed to be doing a 3- and 5-year long-term plan for the school that, we haven't really given a lot of emphasis on. And that's something I think we need to spend a lot more time on this. Again, as I mentioned also, I spent 3 years on the policy committee, which I've learned a lot about, what's happening at the school, what are the key policies. I worked on like the residency policy. We just finished this, on the business affairs. I worked on the wellness policy. These were like very critical policies that were adopted at the school. Hey, how are you? Also, the last couple of months working, on understanding what people really want for the school. I spent a lot of time, while I was considering running for the Board of Education, I spent a lot of time speaking with a lot of different people in the community and really understanding what are the needs of the school, what people are thinking, what are the critical elements that, they want to adopt in the school. I think, this is a really good dialogue we're having with the community, really understanding how the school fits into the community and what we need to do. Next question. Shared services. We touched base on this when we did meet the candidates. It's an important, we're a small school, and we're trying to offer as many possible programs to the students as we can. There's a lot of things we can offer. There's a lot of things we don't have the resources maybe to offer. And I think that's where it's important to really partner with the other schools in the area. We talk about arts, music. Music, unfortunately, as you go through high school, it gets less and less of an important role, and the offerings are much smaller. So, that's something that East Hampton, for example, has a lot more programs to offer there. The same thing with the arts. The IB, we're the only school right now between East Hampton, Bridgehampton, and Southampton that we actually offer the IB program. We offer certain classes. Yes, we could expand further. I think we could become a center for students from the other districts that want to come here and study more of these IB classes. And I think that could be also a benefit and additional revenue for us. Vocational training, it's something we don't offer right now. And we spend a lot of money to send kids to BOCES. Southampton is supposed to start a program for carpentry. I think East Hampton is looking maybe to do auto mechanic. It would be good if we offer something here also, so then we can keep the kids within the area and also don't have them go to Riverhead or West Hampton or whoever else is offering those and not be part of the student community. Yeah, next. Reserves. That's a big question. And I know it's everyone thinks about it. We have about 13.6 million right now. A lot of we built them up in the last 5-6 years, those reserves. There's a trend in Long Island right now that school districts grow significantly those reserves. They said last year there was a study that in Long Island, I think about 4.45 billion are kept in reserves. There were 29 audit requests from the state comptroller in Long Island about schools keeping too high reserves in the schools. So the benefit is, yes, by having those good reserves, we always on a rainy day, what's going to happen if we cut back the budget or the taxes go down and we don't have enough revenues. If we want to have more capital projects, if we want to do repairs, it's good to have those. It's good also for our Moody's rating, so we borrow cheaper. So I see the benefit of having them, but you can't have too high reserves because that kind of works against our taxpayers. That's it? Yeah? Okay, IB program. Again, we're the only school district out east that we offer that IB program. And there's a lot of discussion, IB versus AP. AP is focused a lot on the testing. IB gives you a little bit better critical thinking skills and gives a lot more emphasis on the writing. We offer certain subjects. We don't offer everything. It would be great if we see more subjects like in arts, for example, and offerings. My sister is an IB teacher in math in high school in Greece. So she has I had extended discussions with her about it. She's seen all different type of programs. She told me, I think this is the program for the future. Why? We are living in a global world. We're becoming more and more competitive on a global level. Even if you see the admissions in the US colleges, the international admissions are getting higher and higher. So you kind of you need to see yourself, even though we're from this place or whichever place in the US, as members of a global community for our students. And I think that's what the IB offers. It gives more a standardized kind of international education for all the students. All right? Stella Maris. It's controversial. The community decided a few years ago to go ahead with the Stella Maris project, and they did vote on a budget to issue the bond of 10.2 million. There's a question right now whether it's going to be done on time for August deadline, and what would it actually cost us. I think we need to get a better grasp on the financials. Yesterday there was a presentation in the board meeting about a breakdown of the expenses. I think there was a request to give more money for certain things that they were not planned, partially approved by the board yesterday. We do need to do a cost-benefit analysis, and I think if the community thinks that this is something that we don't need anymore, I think we have to examine this. what would you cut from the budget if it was defeated? I mean, I went through the whole budget process this year in the different workshops. I think, and that's something I want to bring up also on the last point, what would you change in the budget? The way the budget was developed was from a bottoms-up approach. What did we do last year? What did we spend? Let's keep this and see what else are we going to grow. I think there's a lot of cushion in the budget, so we could do a budget that is a lot more accurate, and I think that would eliminate some of the costs. I think also there's certain items in there that could be trimmed further. For example, there's the PR and communications, that it's a significant number that I don't think we really use, and I think that could be eliminated. I think the goal of having like a more streamlined budget is so we don't shift money around in other things when they're supposed to be on certain things. Now, if we get down to the point that the budget is rejected and we need to like save more money, I think we have to get input also from all the different departments. So throughout the budget process, yes, the principals come, the athletic director, all of them, and they say, this is what we want to have in the budget for the next year. I think we have to go back to them and say, well, now we can't spend that much money and we have to cut back on certain things. But whatever we do, I don't think it has to affect the educational programs, because that's something we cannot sacrifice. I think there's a lot more cushion in the budget to cut back that it wouldn't affect those programs.
Okay, you have 4 minutes left. Use it, take questions from the floor.
Yeah.
Whatever you want.
Yes.
I wasn't here in the beginning of the meeting, so I don't know if this was brought up. But what are your thoughts about consolidation?
Consolidation, yes. Yes. So there's a discussion right now, since we have a lot of smaller districts, for example, Sag Harbor, Bridgehampton, Sagaponack, Wainscott, can we consolidate some of the school districts? The discussion is, yes, we could save money from that. I have my own opinion also that, by consolidating certain districts, you could lose the kind of identity and the culture of every school. I think what we could do is we can push more for shared services, and I think maybe we can consolidate some of the functions. So more administrative functions, whether it's like the business administrator, whether it's like auditing, things like that. I think Bridgehampton, we have issues consolidating with us because I think the taxpayers think their taxes are going to go much higher by expanding to a bigger school district. It will definitely benefit us, but it's a process that both have to decide. Again, shared services, I think we have to emphasize more on. It's a consolidation more on the administrative side.
How about transportation?
It's another big issue, transportation, because we spend a lot of money there. So that's something we have to look. What's your question on transportation?
I mean, is there a way of consolidating transportation that instead of making each individual school district have do we own our buses in Sag Harbor?
We do most, but we still outsource part of it to the Montauk Bus Company. So we do spend some money there. I mean, there's right now, I think one of the things that people have to vote also is buy an additional bus, I think for Sagaponack, and another one to replace one of our fleets. That's going to come out of the reserves, but again, it's an additional cost. Maybe we can eliminate that.
I was thinking about like a fleet.
Yes.
Not only for Sag Harbor, but for maybe the entire town.
That's something we should definitely look into it. If it fits the schedules and the programming and everything, yes.
Yeah.
If we can save money from transportation this way, yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
You have 1 minute left.
Okay. Cool.
So the school district is about to embark on a search for a new superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
What would you be looking for, and what's the skill set that we need as a community for our next superintendent, who's our CEO or COO?
So I think we need to have a visionary, someone who's going to think about the future of the school and what needs to be done, but also someone with very strong business skills, someone who understands the budgets, someone who understands the capital projects we're dealing with right now, and also a good educator that understands not only like what we're offering right now, program-wise, but also what we need to offer in the future.
Okay.
That's it?
No, you got another 27 seconds.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Yeah, you said the non-performing reserves you spoke about, that we have. Do you have any ideas on how we can get some performance from some of those extra reserves that you were speaking about?
Well, we have right now about 13.6 million in reserves. We also have to think that we're going to have some obligations that we have to contribute to the New York teachers. Oh, I'll finish. In the future. So it's good to have those reserves, but I think at the same time we have to manage and not grow them too much, because that's been the trend across Long Island and the state, and I think we can cut back when it's needed. And also, like, if we have better long-term financial planning, I think we can manage those reserves also better.
Okay.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
The next candidate is Julian Barratt. All yours.
Do we don't. Do we need it? Oh, you need it. Okay. Hello. Is that better? So, good evening. I thought, unless anybody objected, I'd just sort of go down the piece of paper, given that it was the piece of paper you gave me. Does that suit everybody? Fine. But feel free to redirect or tell me to shut up. So, what are my qualifications and skills? Sorry?
Can you just introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I was going to do that. Thank you. Hello, I am Julian Barratt. I am 56 years old. I have 3 sons, aged 13, 5, and 5. So I suppose the first question here is, what qualifications and skills do I bring to this? So 3 things. Educationally, I have a degree from a top 10 university in England, an honours degree in business administration and French. So if any of you need some really bad menu translations, I'm very useful. Professionally, I spent 27 years working in finance in senior roles. I was a managing director of a global derivatives trading business with people in London, New York, Singapore, Chicago, Houston, and LA. And I did that for Bankers Trust, Merrill Lynch, and Bank of America. So I'd like to think that I have a reasonable affinity with complicated, knotty problems, and certainly budgets and finance I should be highly comfortable with. I've also, for what it's worth, I know it's not the same type of board exactly, but I have been for the last 7 years on the board of a not-for-profit private school in Manhattan. A different process than this because it's private money, not public money, but it is a not-for-profit, relatively progressive school. So I have a certain amount of experience of being on school boards, albeit slightly different. The sports program. Oh, yes, right. So the question about shared services. I think this is interesting. First of all, if I were to just personally, from what I've seen so far, to grade, you mentioned music, arts, trades, and IB. I think broadly speaking, I know you're really asking about shared services, but just to say, I think we're pretty good at music, and we're pretty good at arts, and we're looking increasingly good and pretty good at IB. I think we're weak on the trades front, and that's something I feel quite strongly about. My dad was an electrician, and I think that we could do significantly more with that. I know that there is a program at BOCES, but I don't know why it's at BOCES. I think it should be in the schools to some degree, to whatever extent we can manage to bring that in. One thing with any shared service is I'm really struck by how unbelievably expensive it is moving people around. As soon as you introduce into any idea that you have to start bussing people around, and this is sports, whatever it is, you start racking up money really quickly. And it's always, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have shared services in that respect, but always be aware that when you start to try to share services, one difficulty with it is that you start chasing your own tail quite quickly, because you say, let's share this service with this other school. That means we now need to start moving people, and it can be a difficult circle to square. The I think the most interesting thing about your question about shared services is that you haven't mentioned the area that I think is completely crying out for the benefit of shared services, and that's in special ed. So we have 6 school districts out here, each administering a modest number, half a dozen to a dozen, special needs kids with huge inefficiencies and overlaps. They completely separately administer them and don't really talk to each other about this. There's a chronic structural shortage, not just in Sag Harbor, but across the whole East End, of the skill set required to administer to those children. So the therapists and the specialists and so on are thin on the ground. The way to increase the amount of therapists and specialists available is through training. They're not going to suddenly up sticks and move out here with the housing prices being what they are. And the way to train them is to have somebody senior and a reasonable scale of program that enables you to train those people. So the argument that we should somehow consolidate that part of what we're doing into a single centre, I think, is extremely strong. And I think given that we are long of a building at the moment, that a lot of people are discussing what it should be used for, I think using at least part of it for a young autism program would be a very good use of resources. So to be clear about that, if it's a young autism program, up to the age of 5, none of this is school money, it's county money. So I want you to be clear about that. No one's spending any money that's in any of what we're talking about, okay? It's the county until they're 5 years old. We currently bring in 54 kids from 2 or 3 other school districts and make about $1.02 million a year in revenues from doing that, regular learners. I don't see why Sag Harbor shouldn't be able to replicate that model in something like autism and have numerous children coming in from nearby school districts into some kind of centre where we have enough scale that we can generate the skill set that we need with training programs, and Sag Harbor actually gets paid for it instead of paying for it. And the whole thing is done by virtue of that age group on county money instead of school money. So I wanted to throw that out there in terms of shared services. I think that's the area that's really crying out for it. Reserves. Reserves is interesting. I do think that it is an obvious good idea to build up significant reserves. The obvious question is what's significant and how much is enough. So by my estimation, $13.5 million, if we all hit rainy times and we had to do something like cut the tax base or the tax revenues by, say, 10%, we've got about 4 years of runway right now because the tax bill is about $33.5 million. So if you knocked off 3 and we've got 13.5 in the bank, loosely speaking, we've got 4 years of runway. That sounds like, frankly, quite a lot of runway to me. There's also the question, when I looked at the numbers of the different buckets, it's allocated into various different buckets and the buckets aren't allowed to mix. I did notice that and stop me if I'm wrong if anybody knows different, but the transport reserve is approximately $2 million. I might be missing something, I'd be happy to be informed why, but buses cost 100 grand. So there seems to be a disconnect in my mind at least between the size specifically of the transport reserve and how much it costs to buy a bus. So as I said, I could be missing something there, but I certainly don't think we need more reserves at this point. Refunding, I'm not so sure that's that easy to do anyway, maybe over time running them off, but generally the tip with reserves is hold on to them until you see tax revenues dipping, because there's a cycle to all these things, and if tax revenues come under pressure for sort of macro reasons, it could be a multi-year trend. So hold on to them for the moment would be my personal view. The cost of the IB program. The cost of the IB program is actually very difficult to calculate because there are a lot of moving parts to it. If we went out and just hired an IB staff, it would be easy to calculate, but we didn't. And for good reason. What we did was, we did a bunch of professional development of existing staff so that they had extra capabilities with respect to IB. We gave a pay rise, I believe, to one person to take on an IB-specific role. But you could see, even if you sat down a really experienced cost accountant with all kinds of different cost allocation methods here and said, tell me how much this cost, it's a fairly labyrinthine thing because you're using a lot of existing resources that are already there and take the form of sunk cost. So that's not entirely clear on the cost side. On the benefit side, I think the benefits are numerous. First of all, I see you've asked the question in terms not only of those who do the IB, it's a good thing. I mean, if they walk out with a decent score in the IB, that's to their credit and gives them significant opportunities in terms of local and international college recruitment. So I think that's a bit of a no-brainer. For those who don't participate necessarily in the IB. First of all, there are a lot of people who study IB courses but don't necessarily go all the way through to finish the IB diploma. And they get very significant benefits from those studies, so bear that in mind. There's actually one of the bits of paper I handed out somewhere near the back has some information on the IB that I pulled off the web that I think is quite interesting. And then there's the professional development side of it. Clearly, if the staff across the board undergo various forms of professional development, that's to the benefit of everybody, regardless of whether they're doing the IB or not. But there's one other big factor in this, I think, which is the school's external profile. And I mentioned this the other night in the debate, whatchamacallit, the Meet the Candidates at the school. Successful public schools who are good at sending kids to high-end colleges manage their profile externally. They brand themselves and manage their relationships with those colleges. So when you're the recruitment people at an Ivy League university and you get some kids shown to you from Jericho is a good example, they're the #1 rated school on Long Island, you feel like you've got some kind of sense of identity and brand outside of the kid, of what Jericho is about and what you're likely to be getting, what they've been taught, and so on and so forth. And that always needs to be managed. I have said already that I think we need to step that up here. I think it's the third leg of the matriculation stool. We've done better on, with the IB is very good, and we've done better on SAT scores, but I think we're weak on that side and we need to shore it up. But the IB helps with that. The IB is important in terms of us being able to manage and increase our external profile and have, when you ring up and say we're looking at these, when you're sitting at these colleges and saying we're looking at these smart kids from these schools we're used to recruiting kids from, and then somebody says, what is Sag Harbor and where is it? This helps to manage that and increase that profile. So I think that's important. How am I doing for time? I've lost track.
4 minutes, 42 seconds.
Left or gone? Left. Stella Maris, always a fun subject. So I will be frank with you and say that I'm yet to receive what I consider to be a concise answer when I just say, in a shrinking student population, why did we buy a building? I haven't received what I would think a linear answer, so that remains sort of in the air. While we're sort of critiquing it, I know that there has been some sense around board meetings of issues of clarity and whether the goalposts have or have not been moved. Was this item that's now being asked for money, was it not previously, was it in phase 1 or is it in phase 2, and was it the whole kitchen or half the kitchen? There's been a sense of shifting sands, moving goalposts, whatever the metaphor is there, associated, I think, with it. I think we're now running $13.5 million, I think is the number, so far. It's this week's number. So, look, in any real estate project, they always take longer and go over budget, but you sort of know that going in. So what you don't want to be is surprised halfway through. And anyone who's ever tried to build anything will know that it's the change orders is where all the money gets made, right? So don't change your plan. Don't make plans as you're going along. Make all of your plans at the outset and then just execute them. Is rule 1 of any... You know what I mean? So there you go. Do I think it should be sold? No. I think I've already suggested to you, I think there's a very compelling use for at least part of it, which is a young autism program that we'd actually get paid for and help solve an East End-wide problem in the process. What would I cut from the budget now, or if it were defeated? Budgets are very difficult things because you can look at $43 million and say, well, that's a ton of money, and we can slice it. But with all budgets, it's kind of like a concertina effect where huge amounts of it are committed long-term in contracts and all kinds of other things. The stuff you can actually wiggle around is always a relatively modest % of the whole stack. So the pressure you put on the things that you try to change and wiggle around becomes disproportionate, and that's always a difficult issue. If you asked me to step way back from it and just make a sweeping generalization about how to move a lever, the biggest lever in any budget like this is class size. The average class size in New York State is 22.7 children. The average class size here is 16.5. And if over time, these things take a long time, you don't just flick a switch. If over years people wanted to make the decision to walk class size up, then given that 79% of the cost is the staffing of the classes, that would walk proportionately down. But that would be a multi-year process. This is like, you know, I used to be an oil trader, and when you want to change direction in a supertanker, you put the wheel over and you wait a long time for it to very gradually change direction, and that's how a lot of these things work. SUV gate and the rest of it, I mean, I don't know. I walked into that one just recently. I've already told you I don't quite understand the size of the transport budget. Oh, there's one other one in there. I'm going to mention the numbers that I handed to you. You can observe in there a few things. One is, if you want to look at the admin side of the budget, we on average spend 21% more per student on admin than the rest of Long Island does. There's a chart in there on a spreadsheet. I can't remember which page number it is. I'll point it out, but it's in there somewhere. Is it? Yeah, probably. I should have been more organized. Oh, admin, page 2. Yeah, so you can see over time, it wobbles around a bit, but on average we spend... Now, to be fair to the administration, we have 930 students and we're comparing ourselves to schools that have about 1850 on average. So there's a scale thing in there as well. Life isn't that simple, but that's worth mentioning. The front page is just the budget. I know that you guys were very focused on the budget last time I was here, so I threw up the historic budget numbers, compared them on a cost per student basis, and compared that to the rest of Long Island, so you could get some sense of that. I just mentioned the admin. That's an interesting one. Special ed I already briefly spoke about. And then there's some stuff at the back. I think it's interesting that we've gone from 21st to 19th to 17th in terms of SAT results on Long Island. That's a really encouraging trend. It's to be applauded, and it's a good thing. And then I did look at some stuff on the IB. If you look at page 6, is that? That's a chart of our scores on the IB, and you can see that we've now met and exceeded worldwide scores on the IB program, and are doing so consistently. And you can also see from the next page, page 7, that the enrollment in the IB is steadily climbing. So this thing has really, it's gone from a pilot to a teenage thing to, I think, at this fully mature and proven, and clearly a good thing in that respect. Sorry, that was extremely rushed because I had a lot I wanted to say. I'm more than happy if anybody wants to chat about any of this other stuff. These are my business cards with an email and a phone number. If anybody wants to chat about anything I wrote in here, but there you go. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
Feel free to take over.
All right.
We're all set.
Good evening. Good evening. Hi, I'm Chris Tice, and I want to thank the Noyac Civic Council for organizing tonight and giving an opportunity for us to get to know each other better. And we're being videotaped, so hello out there in TV land. Some of you recognize me probably because I have been serving on the school board for 9 years, and I have really treasured that honor. So first off, why am I asking to be reelected? A couple of things. First of all, I'm very passionate about education. I come from a family of public school teachers and was raised to really respect and honor the public school system. It's not an easy job. Also, I've just been passionate about education and being engaged here in the community. So when we moved here 15 years ago, and by the way, Noyac is very near and dear to my heart. I spent every summer in my childhood from the mid-'60s here. I know you're thinking I'm 28, how could that be? But from the mid-'60s, back then my dad, a public school teacher, asked a colleague, where can I bring a family of 6 who has very little money? And they said, Sag Harbor, Great Place Beach. That's not the answer anymore, obviously. But anyway, because it's not so cheap to be here. But anyway, so I spent my childhood here. About 23 years ago, I bought my first house in Noyac, and I moved out here full-time 15 years ago with my husband and my 3 daughters. So I have three kids who've been through the Pearson and elementary school experience. 2 have graduated. One's got a great job in Albany. Another's a 3rd year at Rochester Institute of Technology. And my baby, who's about this tall, is in 11th grade. So I really do understand the K through 12 experience. I've kind of lived up and down that experience as a parent and seen 3 very different children live that experience. So I think I bring that to the table. Before I ran for school board, I was involved in other ways. So I was co-president of the PTA. I was on several district committees. In fact, I was asked to be on a very small committee. I was a parent representative to hire an assistant principal in the elementary school. This was years ago. I went to almost every school board meeting for 2 years before I ran, because you don't really understand what it's like until you're there and you listen to the issues. And I didn't just listen, I got engaged, I learned about it, I spoke up, I asked questions, I tried to contribute. So when I became a school board member, I had a very good sense of what that meant. And it does take years to get your sea legs, to really have the right perspective about what to do. There's a lot to learn with the law, with the regulations. I bring with me institutional knowledge. We have the least senior school board we've had in at least 30 years. So, and that's no diss on them. It's wonderful to get fresh new blood and new thinking. It's really important to have that balance. But only 2 of 7 of us are not on our first term. And my colleague, who is the other tenured person, announced publicly recently she's not running for re-election. So having that institutional knowledge is important. I'm also the only school board member who has been through a superintendent search. And if you haven't heard, our superintendent, Katie Graves, has decided to retire early next year, and we thank her for her great service, but that's another process. So, and if you have any more questions about that afterwards, I'll come back and I can answer them. But I apologize, I have to read the questions because I have old eyes. Sports program. So what could you do to shared services and specialty learning areas such as music, arts, trades, and IB? We do some shared services right now. We have some IB come here. I think we need to do more. And one of the challenges we have is just we don't have most of our schools aren't 5 minutes away. So one of the things we wrestle with is how long do you take someone out of the school district for one class or one activity? But we do share some things. We've had some performing arts where we've had kids come into our district. But I do think this is an opportunity that we should look at doing more. We have a superintendent that meets with other superintendents, but we probably on the administrative level could get regional administrators together and say, are there intersections where we have needs and you deliver services or vice versa? Or as we're hiring, are there opportunities for us to share services, save money, and be more strategic? So I would really, encourage us to continue to do that. And if I'm talking fast, I'm sorry, but the gentleman leaving said you can't cover enough, so I'm trying to get through it. What is a healthy reserve, and when is it necessary to refund the taxpayers and community? This is a question that's come up several times this budgeting season. The state dictates the maximum level you can have, and they also have recommendations of what that level should be. And I'm proud to say that we have achieved that in the district. 9 years ago, during my first year, the reserves had been depleted to a record unhealthy level. We got dinged from the state about it, and so over the past 9 years, we've really tried to be thoughtful about how we can build that reserve up. The benefit to you as a taxpayer, one of the benefits is that it increases our Moody bond rating, and we've had increases, I think, 4 or 5 times in the past 7 years, and that means it costs us much less to borrow money. So it means it costs you much less when we have to borrow money to do things in the district. So there's a big advantage to that. I've advocated several times when we've had extra money to return it to the taxpayer. And if you watch the videos during budget season or any budget meeting, there are times when I do think it's appropriate, and I suggested that last night at a meeting when the majority of the board voted to spend over $300,000 of unearmarked money to additional Stella Maris spend. I did not authorize that. I was one of 2 dissenting votes on that. I suggested that we only do the safety mechanisms because the superintendent said that we needed to do the safety mechanisms for the gymnasium to be used. So of the over 300,000, about 60,000 was safety. I suggested let's do that then, but I was a dissenting vote, and over 300,000 was approved. You'll read about it in tomorrow's paper. And I did suggest, because they had talked about extra reserves, that we should be returning some to the taxpayer, meaning let's bill you less next year if we have extra money. Let's not always assume that we just roll it over because we've been able to bring in more revenue. There needs to be a real balance between continuing to build what I think is an exceptional educational program with recognizing that not everybody is a retired, hedge fund guy or gal that has unlimited money. And many of you are on fixed incomes, and if we want to continue to have a community that is rich with history and rich with a diverse population, we need to respect every taxpayer and the situation they're in and not just the most advantaged. So I think we should do that and do it thoughtfully, not every time, but do it thoughtfully, and I'm still waiting for us to do that on my 9 years on the board. Is the cost of IB program worth it versus all students? It's interesting. I think there's a little misperception about the IB program. The majority of students currently in 11th and 12th grade are taking at least one IB course. So it's really not a program just for your top performers. And one of the advantages of IB, and this was similar to AP, although IB is really more the gold standard, is that it helps prepare our students for when they go to college. And the feedback that we're getting is that students feel more prepared. They feel more ready. Now, that being said, we have to make sure that we have the right programs for students that don't decide to pursue that or decide not to go to college. And I think that's an area where we probably could do more. We've been increasing that focus, but we could do more. But by the way, the IB replaced AP. So this isn't a new idea of having kind of college preparatory courses. It was just evaluated as a better program. And I did bring, this was from the newspaper, but a couple years ago there was a chart in the newspaper that showed over the course of years how many are enrolled in the diploma program and how many were enrolled in at least one class. The diploma program has gotten a lot of steam, so we have a lot more kids doing the diploma program than they used to. It's not for everybody, but we do. In terms of the cost, it's a little more expensive than AP, but not a lot more expensive. The costs for the exams that we pay are about the same. The difference is there's an enrollment cost, which costs us a little more. But beyond that, there's a training cost. We've actually already spent most of that, but there's a little bit of training course. But what they bring back to the classroom and has kind of had a sea change in how teaching is happening throughout the district, and there's a big benefit. And when you look at a budget of our size, if you're looking at a cost of maybe $50,000 for the year or $60,000 for the year for kind of a college prep program, it is not considered a high cost, and the return on investment has been very high, we're hearing from students. Just keep these on. Stella Maris, do I favor doing a broad community-wide analysis and fact check? Well, last night I'm on record for saying I don't think we should be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars that the community did not authorize without going back to the community. I asked to postpone the vote because we hadn't heard this before. Last night was the first time as a board we were told that the superintendent felt that the gymnasium was unsafe and we needed the security and another list of features. So I lobbied publicly for, let's put a pin in this, let's hear from the community. Now, there is an advantage when your walls are open and your floors aren't done to do more work, but at the end of the day, it's not our money, it's your money. And you told us we got an authorization for a certain amount, and if it's above that, we should at least afford you the opportunity to tell us if you think we should spend more. So, I went on record last night, and that's a synopsis of that. Do I think that we should have a survey about whether to sell the building or not? If you go to IGA like I do, you hear a lot of opinions about this from both sides of every aisle in IGA. And I don't know if we should sell it or not. It's hard to say you should sell it before you've even opened the building and when you've already spent most of the money. But I do think that you should be asking the board and the superintendent constantly for accountability. I mean, our last update was in January, and I've been asking 2 or 3 times a month between January and last night, why aren't we getting an update as a board, and why are you not getting an update as public, both in terms of what's been spent and done, what's projected to be done, and the timeline. And it wasn't until we were being asked for more money that we could that I and another board member could say, we can't do that unless you give us an update on where we are. So I'm asking you to demand that this district communicate more and more often about how that project is going, because we should be. And
Get that on the ballot.
You need to either write or come to a meeting and demand it, because I'm only one of 7 votes, and I'm in the minority of really requiring the transparency and accountability that I think this project should have and that you as the public deserve. Let's see. What would I cut from the budget if I had to do cuts or it's defeated? The budget's pretty complicated, and I went through all 55 pages, line by line, little print, and from my perspective, there's not a line that I would cut. I would haircut a lot of things. I think that we have a little bit of padding in a lot of places that are unnecessary, and if we did haircuts across the board in most of those categories, and many of them, it would actually be quite a bit of money. I had requested that during the process. Didn't happen, but I think that would be the approach I would take versus just wiping one thing out per se. I don't think there's a wasted program that we're doing, but I do think that there's money built in, and I would say the last 5 or 6 years I've been on the board, even before we were getting this increase in tuition, we've always ended up, for the most part, almost every year with lots of extra money. So I think we could haircut back a little bit, maybe tax a little less, and we could still maintain what we have. Am I talking too fast? I know I'm going through this quickly. Okay. Oh, okay. And then budget process. I think we got a C+ this year on the budget process, personally. we got a C+, and I'll tell you why. And I'm sharing with you what I've said publicly, so this is not any behind-the-scenes opinion. From 2 or 3 years ago, we eliminated several budget sessions. So we have less sessions. We also made a shift a few years ago and moved them to before board meetings. So they're starting an hour before the board meeting, and you know you have a board meeting coming. They've eliminated a bunch of meetings, so now the list of stuff you have to cover. So then it's okay, save your questions to the end, and then, oh my gosh, people are walking in for the meeting, and then that's not the way to review a complicated budget that affects every citizen in this community. So I think that we need to do a better job of allocating more appropriate time. Additionally, this year we did not do a public line item review of the elementary school budget, the middle school budget, the high school budget, or special ed. Both the board and public got that late, and we never had those presentations line by those administrators. Those are really important budgets. And so we had to kind of figure out what it meant. So we got information late. It wasn't reviewed publicly. So those would be the things that I would change. We should also be starting earlier. The best practices from the New York State School Board Association says you should really start at the end of the previous year. And we just over the past several years, we've kind of started later, and we've been caught breathless at the end. Now, I think that the budget we have is a good budget, but it hasn't been pressure tested the way I think the board should have done or the public should have been able to do. So that's my answer on that. So I know I've gone kind of quickly, but I did want to leave a time.
43 seconds.
I do. So any questions? And do you mind saying your name just so that if I see you, I don't seem stupid? Oh, hi, Raj Schneider.
Can we do anything about technology training for our young people at Stella Maris? Maybe get a tech lab for programming?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I have a material I'm going to leave, but one of the things I've advocated for academically is technology classes, courses, and clubs, and I'm really excited that over the past several years we've done that. So, we had the robotics club, but we added Cyber Patriots, both in the middle and high school. We've added coding classes. The IB has several of them. We have coding classes in the elementary school, so we've really done that, which is helping to aid kids to be ready for 21st century jobs. We probably could do more, but there's been a huge increase in that, and I would say kudos to our superintendent because she's been an advocate of that as well.
One issue with robotics club, it interferes with sports. So a kid that likes sports and also technology can't do both.
It is, and we're in a school where you have a large minority of kids any one season participate in sports. It could be 40 or 50%. We have riches of opportunity and almost not enough to fill them all. So personally, I've had kids that have had that same struggle, and it's the same season, and so at some point you're going to have to pick where you spend your time because it's hard to do both at once. It is.
20 seconds.
Yes.
So, Chris, I was up there a couple of years ago. You asked me some pointed questions. I hope you don't mind. I'll return.
Bring it on. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, this is another trustee on the Board of Education, Alex Kriegman.
You talk about transparency and fiscal responsibility. How would you equate that with your vote in a closed-door session not to extend the superintendent's contract, and then your motion to spend $25,000 on a private investigator after the Sag Harbor Express revealed what had happened?
Well, first of all, a closed vote in executive session should never be discussed publicly, so I'm surprised that you're bringing that up, because that's an inappropriate thing to do. I understand that, but it is still an inappropriate thing to do, and clearly, if it was reported, whether it's true or not, someone in that room violated executive session, so that is proof, and there's been many violations on my term. The reason why I've raised it publicly and I've not violated executive session is because it makes it very difficult for the board to conduct proper conversations if someone in the room doesn't respect that protocol and will go out and talk to the press or other people. It has happened. I've raised the request of doing an investigation because the only way to stop it is to make sure it gets stopped. Anyway, if you have, the bell rang, if you let me keep talking, but I'll come back at 9 o'clock. If you're still here, you can ask me anything. I'm an open book. Thanks.
Our next guest is Brian DeSessa. And he's here to talk about why he wants to run for school board. Brian, all yours. You have 15 minutes.
So, my name is Brian DeSessa.
Microphone for CTV.
Oh boy, all right, try that. I don't like holding them, but
My name is Brian DeSessa. I know some of the faces in here, some I don't. I live in Sag Harbor with my wife and daughter. We've done so for about 11 years in the downtown. I've served on the Zoning Board of Appeals for the town of Southampton for the past 11 years and serve as their vice chairman at this point. I'm a local practicing attorney now in Bridgehampton. I'm a partner with Adam Miller. We do real estate, land use, development, zoning. In January 28th, or the first meeting in February, I was appointed to fill the vacant seat for the board. So I've been serving in that capacity for the past 4.5, 5 months through the budget review process. So I've been able to obtain some firsthand knowledge on that. I still like it. I still want to run. I'm still here to ask for your vote. So I've done that, and I would appreciate that. In terms of your questions, because 15 minutes will go real quick, and lawyers like to talk, so let's move it on for that. The qualifications that I think that are important to a member of the Board of Education is to be a good listener, to be a good problem solver, to be able to work through any kind of difficulty or any situation with other members when you're going to have differing and diverging opinions. As a lawyer, I'm able to do that, and I think bringing that to the board is important. In terms of benefits on shared services, look, there are benefits to shared services because it keeps costs down, and costs are on everybody's mind these days. You know, how we do that, I think, is yet to be seen. I think more research, more information needs to be obtained. You know, shared teachers, whether it be for a special needs kid, whether it be for an IB program, if we can share those teachers and those costs or those programs with joining districts, I think is a benefit. I think if we can introduce programs in Sag Harbor that bring students from other districts, it's a benefit for two reasons. One, it reduces our cost, and two, it'll bring in revenue to the district, which will lower the burden on the taxpayer. The reserves that have been, I know there's been a lot of question on reserves, the 12 reserves and the different reserve accounts. Look, reserves are there for when we're in a down economy. Reserves are there for when we need something, and we shouldn't have to go back to the taxpayer, or the taxpayer shouldn't be burdened to cover those things. For instance, in my opinion, in watching the budget, I'll tell you, I think the forecasting is an overestimate as to what they do. I don't think or the budget process that I was involved in this year is zero budgeting. I think if you budget $5,000 last year for something and you put $5,000 in the budget this year, I don't think that's zero budgeting. There's zero increase, but that doesn't mean it's zero budgeting. So running a business, I have to do budgeting for my business, and that's not how we budget. So if we budget $5,000 this year, and we only spend $3,000, then next year's budget will be $3,000. And I think that's how it should go moving forward. That does two things, in my opinion. One, it gives you a realistic expectation as to the expenditures that the district is doing. Two, it'll decrease the tax levy necessary for the budget. And if there is a situation under that scenario that money is needed, we have those reserves. So that's what those reserves should be used for, to then, if something comes up. I don't think we should forecast that, and it was said many times that, well, we budgeted that last year and we're doing the same this year. I think more information is needed during the budget process. We asked for it this year, it wasn't available, So if elected, I think next year, one thing I would look to do is start the budget process earlier. I think we need more information. I think we need to see scenarios as to actual spending. I'll get to the other questions quick, but I think this is important because this goes to the tax levy. So when you run a business, or if anyone balances a checkbook, to simplify it, you know how much you have at all times. I don't think an acceptable answer is not, well, we have to wait till we close out the books to know what we have left or what we spend. There's a running tally. I'm not saying you have to do it on a daily basis. I do it on a daily basis, but if it's more complicated, then maybe it could be on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis. I think the taxpayers need to know, and as the board, we need to demand that from the leaders of that school. Sorry, I want to get to all these so you can hear what I have to say on some of these. So just the leftover reserves, and for instance, that came up last night, I think it's important that the superintendent was asking for additional costs on Stella, and I'll tie this into the Stella question to try to hit all your questions. I think two things with Stella. One, I think the taxpayers voted to buy Stella, and that's settled. So we're stuck with it, and we need to make it work one way or another. Or we need to hear from the voters. We were asked last night to authorize the expenditure to bring it up into security compliance and usable compliance for the school, something that was new or new information to me. I voted against it. I think if we are going to spend, and the spending is reserve money. So reserve money, we were told it's money we brought in from transportation revenues or tuitioning in, somewhere in the estimate of $700,000. And that we were asked to then apply a portion of that, half of that, towards Stella to complete it. I voted no for that. Some of you were there last night. And I think my point was, and I said it last night, that should go to a vote to the taxpayers. If we need 700, $1 million, I don't know what that number is, but whatever that number is, it should be up for a referendum. It should go to a vote, and maybe the sentiment in the community is that we no longer want to put money into Stella. Maybe we do that, but as a board member, I don't think I should make that decision. I think the community should make that decision, and I'm hoping that you support me to then put that decision back to you, who funds those accounts. So we're not passing the buck, but I think we should hear from more people than just the board members on that. If the budget were to be defeated right now, what do I think we should cut? Well, first, I think we should look to see what was actually spent. So I don't necessarily think a cut needs to happen. I think we need to say, going back to that example, 5,000 last year, 5,000 this year. Did we spend the 5,000? If we spent 2,500, we can remove 2,500 this year and not cut anything. If cuts have to be made, because I don't think everything gets resolved that way, then we cut from facilities, future plans, nothing that affects programming, education, or the kids. Those are the last things, and you never want to get to that point. The analysis of, some people asked about selling Stella. So more complicated than you think, just as a comment there, because we've already got a bond now. So you have obligations by obtaining that bond. So it's not as easy as we bought it for X, we can sell it for Y. We bought it for X, and now we're into it for X plus an exponential amount, plus the obligations on the bond. So it's not as easy as saying we bought it for $3.2 million, and we're going to sell it for $3.2 and turn the bond in. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, even if that's what the community wanted. So additional analysis would need to be done on that as to what the actual cost to get out of Stella would be, should it go that way. Okay, the budget process. So with the IB program, there's questions about the amount of spending on the IB students and program, and where is it fair to all the other students not involved in the IB program? And if I'm speaking too fast, please just raise your hand. I tend to speak fast, and it's a short amount of time. One of the things I said was I think we should look to do more vocational programs, such as what Southampton is doing with construction management. Or we could do it with computers. We can do it with something else that a neighboring district isn't doing, and it does two things. It gives kids another option aside from IB. It allows for maybe a path forward after graduation for kids to stay here if they don't choose to go to college, and it could bring in revenue to the school, which would help lower the tax levy and help benefit the taxpayers. Southampton's doing it. We're doing, East Hampton's doing it. Wise and Sag Harbor are doing more of it to bring that in. Sorry, speaking fast. Any questions? I like to ask for questions that maybe aren't on the list.
So why should we vote
Sure.
for this budget? Why should we vote to pass this budget?
Well, I think it's a good budget. I don't think it's a bad budget. I think you should vote no on, I'm personally voting no on the transportation part of it, the referendum, because I think that could either be separated. I don't disagree with you on that. It's the best that we could do with the information given.
What would happen if the budget didn't pass?
Then it would go back to the board, and they would have to present it again. If on the second option it didn't pass, it would go, yeah, to an extent. Not advocating for that, but that's a possibility, and I think there's room in there for that. We're going to have 700,000 roughly left over at the end of the year. I'll be there. I'm just trying to. So there's obviously some. There's addition. So we have some room in the budget from that 5,000 to 5,000, and we have overage. We have not overages. We have extras. So we have that extra 700, which could have been rolled over, applied, or done other things with, in my opinion.
I just want to clarify something. So you were saying that if we send it back and there's a new budget from the board, our savings would be about what, you think?
I don't know what the savings, I didn't say what the savings were. I don't know. I said before we make any cuts, there's other opportunities.
What would you like to see that budget come back to us as,
I don't have that information. I need more information to do that. I don't know. Yep.
So you're also on the ZBA.
Yes,
Like, you've been doing that for a long time.
11 years.
Right.
Yep.
But now you're embarking on this new thing to use being on the school district board. What do you imagine accomplishing on the term of the board on the school district?
I think we should be more efficient and more transparent with the budget. I think the numbers need to be known on a regular basis to the community. I think there's no reason not to have that up on the website. I think we should actually do zero budgeting not from a plan perspective to plan perspective, but from a actual cost perspective and forward. Now, there's the consumer price index, 2.4%. There's other economic indicators. So that 2,500, if you wanted to then forecast 2,500 plus 2.4% for the consumer price index, I think that is a reasonable assessment. To say we need 5 just because we did 5 last year, that is not, in my opinion. In terms of a financial standpoint, I think we should expand programming, both in terms of vocational and be a receiving school in terms of, look, we're in an area where jobs are limited and what you can do to stay here is limited. A lot of jobs markets are moving to work from home, work remotely. So we should have more training programs, whether it be in terms of coding or something like that, that you can obtain in high school and become proficient right away and employable right away. I mean, these Silicon Valley firms are hiring kids out of high school that can code before college. You can do that remotely from anywhere in the world. So something along those lines is what I would like to see happen. Yes, I had 2 hands. Yep.
What would you consider an appropriate salary for the new superintendent?
I mean, it's hard to say because a lot of factors go into that. So I wouldn't have one specific number in mind. It's going to be commensurate with the amount of years of experience, what we're looking for, and where we can go with that. We have to also remember, they also have to be the highest paid person in the building, just by order of hierarchy and experience. And I think that's a sliding scale based on their resume and what we need to fill that. Sure. Okay, I'm sorry. Yep.
My name is John Grossman.
Yes. Any relation to Adam Grossman?
I'm
Nice to meet you.
decent chair.
I sit next to him every other Thursday, so. Yep.
Okay. I think we kind of went into a history here of getting superintendents from upstate who come here for 3 or 4 years to jack up their salaries for the last 3 or 4 years so they get a very, very nice retirement.
It's a problem with the pension system. My parents were both principals. I said the same thing to them, but yes, because, but yes, I agree with that. Go ahead.
Do we look for people like from Long Island or from other places that might not be in that situation?
Well, yes, and I think you always, in any business, I think you should start from within and try to promote from within your corporation, school, if there's a qualified candidate. Until you go through that search, you don't know. And then you expand the search area and get wider and wider. It seems to be they come from upstate because here it's hard to hire away a superintendent from another district. And superintendents that are doing well in their district or not in danger of losing their job are reluctant to interview to then cause some kind of chaos within their own school. So that's some of the practical difficulty. But yes, I do agree with you. And if it can be avoided, I think it should be. It's just sometimes we can't.
Maybe our state candidates might be a possibility.
Sir.
From your experience recently, do you feel that the school has the proper internal controls, financial controls, systems that it needs to give you the level of granular analysis of the financials?
I think it should be better. No, I think it should be better. What I've seen, I have not seen the level of detail and information on a rolling basis. It's been sporadic on a periodic basis on my limited time. So it would seem that if I ask you how much is in this account, whether you can do it right now, but you should be able to do it in short order and not have to wait till you close a book or something. But I think it can be better. Absolutely. Should be. Yeah. I can log onto my phone right now and tell you what, the last check that cleared. But I understand that's a micro, not a macro, but yeah.
Put forward for us have shown budget to budget comparisons and things that are very unorthodox in the financial world.
I think budget to budget is not the right one. I think it should be spend to budget. Like what you actually spent on that to what should be budgeted for that. Correct.
It seems like a lot of, like you said, there's padding in there. It's just padding on the pad.
Correct. And that's what I think needs to be looked into further next time. Because that'll help everybody. Yeah, I think you have to be, and I think you have to start earlier with that. Yep. Oh, how about that? Huh? Like I've done that. Thank you very much. Thank you, pleasure.
We have Caleb Kosovo here to tell you why he wants your vote. Okay?
Hello.
And feel free to ask him questions if we have any time at the end. They're all yours. Go right ahead.
Okay.
And microphone for the TV camera.
Oh, for the TV. Okay. Hello, everybody. I know it's past my bedtime, so I'll try to make this quick, or my 20 minutes. But I've lived out here in Sag Harbor about 20 years. Out here, probably more closer to 35. I went to 2 years of school, 1 year in Bridgehampton, 1 year in East Hampton, before moving out to the West Coast, and then coming back here. The last 10 years I've been working with Sotheby's as a broker. I see some brokers here, yeah. Didn't recognize you for a second. But anyway, it's not really my broker skills that I think lend itself to me being helpful on the board. I think my IT background is much more helpful. And I mean that in a way that I think I see the way that we communicate as a community and the school, and I think it's I said it in the past, it's much more of a pulling down information. If you're interested in something, you go to the website and you read it, or you pick up the Sag Harbor Express and you read it. And I'm sort of on information overload with everything that's thrown my way. I might only be interested in the tax issue with the school. My kids might be out of school and I might not care so much about the curriculum, or I might have kids in the school and I'm very much interested in the curriculum. So everybody has different things that they're interested in, and if I were to follow everything that goes on in the school, I'd have to be retired. And as trying to, educate myself about this whole process, I find myself spending hours and hours sifting through all this information. Well, that's what I'm interested in now, but everybody in this community isn't interested in that. So I think I can help push information to people from what they've said they're interested in learning. And by doing that, I'm not going to tune them out, and I'm going to make them more engaged because they're really only getting the information that they've actually been interested in getting. And that would make them more engaged, hopefully. So that's how I think my IT background and my thinking of communicating can help a lot with the board. So I'll go through, oh, by the way, I have 2 kids. One is in 3rd grade and one is in 4th grade. And we love the school. It's a great school and they're happy there, and I'm just hoping to make it even better for them. So I guess that answers the first question as well as introduces myself. Going on to sports programs and the benefit from many shared services, and how can we expand that into music, arts, and trades, and the IB. I actually not so, I'm more concerned with reaching out to the community to share things. To go and participate in arts programs. My kid does NYSMA, and they go off and they go up island and stuff like that. But here in Sag Harbor, we have the new cinema coming. We have Bay Street. In Bridgehampton, we have the Chamber. We have so many great resources of talented people in our community, talented organizations in our community. I want to get them more involved and get our kids more involved with them. I know we have some programs out there that they participate in, but I'd like to get more involvement with the community. I mean, we have such a rich community of artists, and so I'd be more involved in trying to find some sort of ambassador for the arts that can help make connections where artists are working with our students more. So, the district has accumulated substantial reserves. And it's a tough thing on the reserves. It's a tough thing because first I've just spent the time getting into the budget. But, you know, if you've ever had no money in your bank at home, you know it's not a good place to be. So you have to have some healthy balance in your account. What is healthy is going to be very subjective to different people. I think that I've looked at other schools, and I don't think we're higher than a lot of other schools that I've seen. And I think that it's more important to see how we are doing with our reserves. So I looked at the budget, and every year we seem to, it's a good thing, you project what your expenses are, and you come in under, and that's always a good thing. That you hate when you project something and you come in under, and then you're like, where am I going to get the money to do this? So that money that goes, that fund money, every year seems to be in surplus. And every year ends up going into reserves. And I think when I looked at the budget, I don't really like how it's presented on paper because I don't really see a 5-year trend. How have we been doing? Well, this year we missed it, this year we didn't. I actually see the last 3 years we've always exceeded what we've always not spent what we said we were. And if that's the case, then, and we do have healthy reserves, then I think we have to start looking at that and saying, maybe we need to trim this back. Maybe we're not just going to say, well, last year we gave this $10,000. Well, we only used 6, but let's say we do 10 again. And then the same thing happens, and then the same thing happens, and then 3 years later, there's 18,000 left in the reserves, you know, from that money. You look at the bus and the van that they talk about, and they say it's not costing the taxpayers anybody more money. It's not, but it's the money that we've already given them. So it is the money that we have spent. It just has been pushed off into the reserves and being, you know, taken out of that. So it's sort of misleading, if you ask me. But it's a good thing that we have that money, because now, if that's actually needed, then we do have it. The cost of the IB program, is it worth the expense to all students? Well, that's really an interesting question to me, because we live in a community and we are trying to address all the kids in the community. And if you were having the same conversation about special needs kids, you might get hammered for it. You know, we want to address special needs kids. We want to address the kids all the way up to kids who are doing the IB program. So I think you can't just sort of say, well, it's sort of for the elite or the smart kids. We're trying to address the entire community. And so I'm for it. I think it helps in the long run. I think that's why we have kids coming into our school, because we have a very good school, and it's got a good reputation, and we get extra income from people shipping their kids to this school. So I'm all for it. So Stella Maris, okay. I think we jumped into Stella. This is, you know, just my opinion. I think we jumped in a little bit too soon for my liking. I didn't read up a lot on it when it happened. I knew it was on the market. Obviously, I'm in real estate. I knew it was on the market. I didn't really, you know, I know there's a lot of, I had kids, again, mine are 8 and 10, so I found childcare and pre-K in the church basement, you know, and now I've got this huge building that's needing a huge renovation, and I don't always feel like I'm getting the straight answer on what the progress is, the financial stability of the project. So I don't always feel like, so if we were going to have, there was the talk of the kitchen, and stuff. And now, well, that I guess it's been shifted somewhere else, but we're still on budget. And I've done a lot of renovation projects, and you do that. You decide you want the Sub-Zero, and the next thing you're doing, you're getting the Frigidaire. You know, so I can see how you can shift your money around and say, you know, we're still on budget, but it's not what we were saying we were getting. And I'm still not sure of the purpose. So in a couple weeks ago at a meeting, there was a comment about, well, we need security for the doors and everything in the new gym. Katie Graves was asking if we could, you know, do you think we could all get on board with something like that? But in the same breath was, and we love it, brand spanking new, and let's redo the floors and put a new ceiling in. Well, that's not to me exactly the same issue, the same request. So I think there's other things that I've seen not-for-profits, and I'm not sure how the school system, I've not been involved in a school system outside of being on several boards. There are other not-for-profits that have done very well by creating a revenue stream. I know they're talking about renting out space to, whether it be Bay Street for their summer program or kids, other pre-K programs and stuff like that, that they would get income. Well, that's one option. It could have been all retail, and there could have been classrooms and everything downstairs, and they might generate much more income. It could be efficiency apartments for staff that is so hard to find, you know, to get teachers out here, you know, it's impossible. I know the finance, Dr. Cantor, he was talking about getting a helper, and he had only budgeted like 35 and found out nobody's coming out here for 35,000. And the same thing with, there's a lot of positions in school attracting people to live out here. We all know it's not easy to live out here on the salaries that they give. So could it be used for housing? There's a lot of things that I think I would have explored before I went and purchased it. Now, as I see things, I probably would like a independent auditor to be helping monitor where we are on track with it. And maybe reevaluate whether we're still on track and it's worth it. So. What would you cut from the budget now if it were defeated? Well, I would probably go back and look at all those lines where we had surpluses. Every year, on almost every line, there's a surplus. And I would probably look at those surpluses, and instead of saying, I need that 10, go back and say, okay, well, last year you only used 7,200 of it. Let's go back and do it based on what you actually used last year. And across the board, adjust the budget based on what was used, not what you projected you were going to use. Well, how does the budget need to be managed better? In day one, we had this, you know, nice, colorful brochure explaining, or PowerPoint presentation explaining how the process was done. If you look at the very first slide, it's this colorful thing with balloons and telling you, okay, week 1 we're going to do this, week 2 we're going to do that, and then we get to the final one, which looks like this. Now, I'm not a CPA. I do know Excel quite well. I wanted to call up, I didn't have time to call the school and say, could I get some grid lines on here? You know, maybe you could shade the cells every other so I could actually read it better. You know, it's just like it's gone from a picture, a real nice picture, to something when it's really important now, I can't read it. And I would also like more summaries of it. Because, yes, people want to get into the nitty-gritty, especially the people with that kind of background, but we have to prepare this for a layman. We have to prepare this for somebody who doesn't know how to read a balance sheet. We need to make it a lot easier, and that really would, for me, be like a 5-year report of the increase or decrease of the budget. It's been an increase, obviously, each time. I want to see where that fund money went. I want to see how it accumulated over 5 years, because that's sort of the basis of what the community wants to know. They want to know, did you spend my money well? And are you budgeting well, or are you packing some away for a rainy day, which is also good to do. I want to see it on paper better than this. So I think that's all my questions.
30 seconds.
No, I wanted to use the entire time so you couldn't ask me any questions. No. Go ahead.
How can your tech background help us do more with technology here with the kids?
Well, I was on the communication committee for about 3 weeks once. I had to get off of it because I'd been in the private sector of it, and the surveys and the this and that, and they weren't thinking correctly. The site's been redone. It still is not a good working site. It doesn't help. Okay, you want to push information to people so they get what they want and not what they don't want, and so they don't tune out. So that means you have to subscribe to them. So like on the website, if you go to the website, if I have a kid in elementary school and that's all I'm interested in, that's really the stuff I want to hear about. I want to hear about that. I remember when I was thinking about running 3 years ago, there was one thing in the paper about the board position. There were 16 comments throughout the week on Shrek the Musical. Okay, so you have to push people information, what they're interested in. And I think by registering users, you can push what they're interested in getting. And you can track, actually, who's participating better. So.
Okay, your time is up, and you're welcome to stay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Pleasure meeting you.